Irene Cole placed her resignation letter on Kang Jun-woo's desk. God letter, God 4 years. She had given him 4 years, had been the only person, the most powerful man in Seoul, trusted with everything. His secrets, his decisions, his empire. Today, she was done. Jun-woo read the letter slowly. Then he looked up at her and something unreadable crossed his face. No, no, Irene stilled. Excuse me? You are not leaving, Irene. He said her name like it was a boundary, like it was his. And that was the moment she understood. Kang Jun-woo had never once considered the possibility of her walking out that door. Have you ever tried to walk away from someone only to realize they were never going to let you go? Before we continue this story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy deep romance stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe. 4 years earlier. Irene, I'm serious. Irene looked up from the table and frowned slightly. Mina leaned forward across the small cafe table, her eyes bright with excitement. My brother told me about it this morning, Mina continued. They're looking for an executive assistant. Irene raised an eyebrow. Executive assistant where? At Han Corporation. Irene blinked. That place downtown? The one with the 30-story building, yes. Irene leaned back in her chair. That's a massive company, Mina. They're not going to hire someone like me. Why not? Because people like that hire people with connections. Mina rolled her eyes dramatically. My brother works there. That's the connection. Irene stared at her. Mina, I'm serious. He told me they're desperate. The last assistant left suddenly. That sounds like a red flag. Mina shrugged. Or it means the job pays really well. Irene sighed and rubbed her temples. Student loans, rent, bills that never stopped arriving. Executive assistant, Irene murmured. Yes, to who? Mina hesitated. The CEO. Irene froze. The CEO? Yes, that's even worse. Mina burst out laughing. Why? Because CEOs are nightmares. You're making assumptions. I worked for a manager once who threw a stapler because someone scheduled a meeting 10 minutes late. Mina laughed harder. Okay, fair. Irene stared at the laptop in front of her again. Still, Mina said more gently, you need a job. I know. And the pay is apparently insane. Irene looked up slowly. How insane? Mina leaned forward again, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. My brother said the salary alone could wipe out your student loans in a few years. Irene stared at her. Stop talking. I'm serious. You're trying to trap me. I'm trying to help you. Irene sighed deeply. I hate when you're right. Then apply. What if I get the job? Then you'll stop complaining about being broke. And what if the CEO is horrible? Then you'll quit. Irene snorted. That's optimistic. Mina grinned. So, are you applying? Irene stared at the laptop for another long moment. Then she opened a new tab. Fine. Mina clapped her hands. Yes. But if the CEO throws a stapler at me, Irene added calmly, I'm blaming you. Deal. 3 days later, Irene stood in the lobby of Han Corporation. The building was intimidating. Glass walls, marble floors, people walking with the kind of purpose that only came from working somewhere important. Irene glanced down at her folder. Relax, she muttered under her breath. The receptionist smiled politely. You're here for the assistant interview? Yes. Please take the elevator to the 20th floor. Irene thanked her and walked toward the elevators. Inside, she took a slow breath. Okay, she whispered, don't mess this up. The interview itself was surprisingly calm. The HR manager asked practical questions: organization, scheduling, confidentiality. Irene answered every question honestly. By the end of the interview, the woman across the table looked impressed. You seem very composed. I like structure, Irene replied. That will be useful. Why? The woman smiled slightly. The position is directly under our CEO. Irene blinked. Oh, do you have any concerns about that? Irene shook her head. No, the woman nodded thoughtfully. You start Monday. Irene stared at her. I got the job? Yes, just like that. Monday morning arrived faster than Irene expected. She stepped into the massive building again, this time as an employee. The receptionist greeted her warmly. First day? Yes. Good luck. That didn't sound comforting. A senior assistant escorted her upstairs. You'll report directly to Mr. Kang, the woman explained. Mr. Kang? Kang Jun-woo. The name meant nothing to Irene. Is he difficult? The assistant hesitated. He expects competence. That sounds reasonable. The woman gave her a strange look. You'll see. Moments later, Irene stood outside a large office door. The assistant knocked once. Mr. Kang, your new assistant is here. A calm voice responded from inside. Send her in. The door opened. Irene stepped inside. Kang Junwoo looked up from his desk. He was younger than she expected. Sharp suit, dark eyes, an intensity that made the room feel quieter. Irene walked forward and stopped in front of the desk. Good morning, Mr. Kang. I'm Irene Cole, your new assistant. He studied her. Most women who stood in that office reacted the same way. Nervous, impressed, sometimes even flirtatious. Irene did none of those things. Instead, she opened the folder in her hands. I've reviewed the schedule HR sent me, she continued calmly. You have a board meeting at 11 o'clock and a conference call at 2 o'clock. Would you like me to confirm the attendees now? Junwoo stared at her for a sec longer. Interesting. He leaned back slightly. You're starting immediately? Yes. Confident. Prepared. His lips curved faintly. I see. Irene looked up briefly. Is there anything else you'd like me to prioritize today? Junwoo watched her carefully. No nervousness, no attempts to impress him, just quiet efficiency. For the first time in a long while, Kang Junwoo felt something unusual. Curiosity. Miss Cole. Yes, you're aware you're working for me now. Yes, and that doesn't intimidate you? Irene considered the question for a moment. Should it? The faint smile on his lips deepened slightly. No, she was definitely not like the others, and Kang Junwoo noticed it immediately. For the first few weeks, Irene learned one important rule about Kang Junwoo. He hated inefficiency. Why is this meeting here? He asked one morning, tapping the schedule on his desk. Irene glanced at the tablet in her hands. The marketing director requested it. It wastes 40 minutes. I know. Junwoo looked up at her. And you allowed it? No, his eyebrow lifted. I moved it. Thursday, she said calmly. Silence. Then he nodded once. Good. Irene made a quick note on her tablet. Working for Kang Junwoo required precision, calmness, and the ability to ignore the chaos that followed him everywhere. Because chaos followed him constantly, especially in the form of women. It didn't take Irene long to realize that her boss had a reputation. A very famous one. Your CEO is ridiculous, Mina said one evening over dinner. Irene looked up from her noodles. Why? Because every woman in Seoul seems to be in love with him, Irene sighed. Mina, I'm serious. Mina leaned forward. My brother said the man shows up in gossip columns every other week. Gossip columns exaggerate. Do they? Yes, Mina raised an eyebrow. So, he's not handsome? Irene paused. He is. That's irrelevant. It is not irrelevant. It is to me. Does he flirt with you? Irene almost laughed. No, why not? Because I work for him. That has never stopped men before. He's not stupid. Mina grinned. So, he flirts with other women. Irene sighed again. Yes. And that part was true. Over the next few months, Irene saw a parade of beautiful women pass through Kang Junwoo's life. Actresses, models, socialites, daughters of powerful businessmen. They came and went like seasons. Some stayed a few weeks, some stayed only a few nights. None of them stayed long. Irene never commented on it. She simply scheduled meetings, managed the office, and did her job. But she noticed something else too. Junwoo noticed her. Not in the way other men noticed women. Not with flirtation, not with charm, but with curiosity. It began with small things. One afternoon, he watched her argue calmly with a senior executive who tried to change his schedule. No, Irene said firmly. The executive frowned. Miss Cole, I need this meeting moved. You requested the time slot 3 weeks ago. Yes, but something came up. Then it will have to wait until next week. The man sighed dramatically. You're very strict. I'm very organized. Junwoo listened to the exchange from inside his office. Interesting. Most assistants folded under pressure from executives. Irene didn't. Another time, he overheard her refusing a delivery. No flowers, she told the courier. They're for Mr. Kang. I know. They're expensive. That doesn't change the policy. What policy? The one that says gifts are returned. The courier looked confused. But they're roses. I can see that. And the sender is a famous actress. That's nice. So please take them back. The courier blinked. You're serious? Yes. Later that afternoon, Junwoo stepped out of his office. Mrs. Cole. She looked up. Yes, you returned the flowers. Yes. Why? You don't like distractions. His lips twitched slightly. You're correct! Irene nodded and returned to her tablet. Moments like that happened often. Small things, quiet observations, and slowly, over the months, something unusual happened. Kang Junwoo began to trust Irene Cole. By the end of the first year, she handled nearly every aspect of his schedule. By the second year, she knew his routines better than anyone else. By the third year, she was the only person in the building who could interrupt him during important meetings. And by the fourth year, she was the only person Kang Junwoo truly relied on. One evening, Irene was finishing paperwork when Junwoo stepped out of his office. You're still here? She didn't look up. It's 8:30. That's late. You're still here? That's different. Why? I own the company. Irene smiled faintly. Then you should go home. And leave you working? I'm leaving in 5 minutes. He leaned against the desk. You've been here 4 years. Yes, that's longer than most people last. I'm aware. You never ask for favors. I don't need favors. You never gossip. I don't have time. And you never flirt. That made her finally look up. Is that a complaint? No. His gaze rested on her for a moment. Just an observation. Irene closed the file she was holding. Well, she said calmly, standing up. Good night, Mr. Kang. And she walked past him toward the elevator. Junwoo watched her leave. The quiet confidence, the calm professionalism, the way she never tried to impress him. For 4 years, Irene Cole had treated him exactly the same, like a boss, nothing more. And somehow that made her the most interesting woman he knew. The engagement announcement happened on a Thursday evening. Irene did not know about it until the morning of the dinner. Board dinner tonight, Junwoo said casually while signing a document. She glanced up from her tablet. Location, Hotel AKORA. She typed quickly. Time, 7 o'clock. Noted. She paused. Is there anything special I should prepare? Junwoo looked up at her. For tonight? Yes. No. That was unusual. Board dinners normally meant speeches, presentations, announcements, negotiations. Tonight, apparently, meant none of those things. Irene simply nodded. Understood. She returned to her work. But throughout the day, something about the atmosphere inside the company felt different. Executives whispered more than usual. Assistants moved faster. At one point, 2 directors stopped talking the moment Irene passed them in the hallway. Strange. That evening, she arrived at Hotel AKORA 15 minutes early. The ballroom reserved for the dinner was elegant but quiet. Long tables, soft lighting, private security near the entrance. Typical for Han Corporation events. Irene stood near the back wall with her tablet, confirming the arrival list. One by one, the executives entered. Board members, investors, senior partners. Then, Kang Junwoo arrived. The room shifted the moment he stepped inside. He wore a dark suit, tailored perfectly as always, confident, calm, powerful in the quiet way that made people straighten in their chairs. Irene had seen him like this 1,000 times, but tonight, something about him felt distant. The dinner began. Conversations flowed around the table, business discussions, investment updates, future expansion plans. Irene remained near the wall, taking notes quietly when necessary. Halfway through the dinner, the chairman cleared his throat. The room slowly quieted. Before we conclude tonight, the older man said, Mr. Kang has something he would like to share. Several people turned toward Junwoo. Irene glanced up from her tablet. He stood calmly from his seat. There was no hesitation in his posture, no uncertainty in his voice. I will be announcing an engagement, he said. The room froze for half a second. Then murmurs spread across the table. Engagement? Mr. Kang? Really? Junwoo continued. To Youre. More murmurs. Some surprised, some impressed. Youre, the daughter of one of the most powerful chairmen in Korea. A strategic alliance, a political marriage, the kind that strengthened empires. Around the table, congratulations began almost immediately. Congratulations! A powerful match! This is excellent news for the company. But Irene barely heard any of it. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tablet in her hands. Youre. Of course, that made sense. A man like Kang Junwoo would never marry for love. Not when alliances like that existed. Not when power like that mattered. Still, something in her chest tightened unexpectedly. She looked down at the screen of her tablet, pretending to review notes. Professional. Stay professional. Across the room, Junwoo's eyes moved briefly through the crowd and stopped on her, just for a moment. Irene didn't react. She simply continued looking at the tablet in her hands. But inside, something had shifted. 4 years. 4 years working beside him. 4 years watching him build his empire. 4 years convincing herself that none of it mattered. And suddenly, she realized something uncomfortable. She had grown too comfortable in his world, too close to his orbit. Close enough that hearing about his engagement felt wrong. Later that night, Mina answered Irene's call on the first ring. "So?" Mina asked immediately. "How was the fancy corporate dinner?" Irene exhaled slowly. "He's getting married." Silence. "What? Engaged? To who? CEO Youre," Mina nearly shouted. "The CEO Youre? Yes. The billionaire's daughter? Yes. Oh my God." Irene leaned back against her kitchen counter. "It makes sense. Does it? Yes, he's rich. She's powerful. Families like that marry strategically." Mina was quiet for a moment. Then, she asked gently, "And why do you sound like someone just canceled Christmas?" "I don't. You do." "I'm fine, Irene." "I said I'm fine." Another pause. Then Mina said carefully, "You've worked for him 4 years. Yes. You see him almost every day." "Yes. And you feel nothing?" Irene hesitated. "Of course not." Mina didn't sound convinced. "Well, maybe it's time you move on." Irene looked down at the counter. Maybe. The thought had already crossed her mind. 4 years was a long time, long enough to get comfortable. Too comfortable. Maybe it was time to leave that world before it started affecting her judgment. Before it became harder to walk away. And that was the thought that stayed with Irene Cole the entire night. By morning, she had made her decision. The next morning, Irene arrived at the offices earlier than usual. The building was still quiet. Only a few assistants had arrived and the cleaning staff were finishing their rounds. She walked into her office and sat down slowly. For several minutes, she did nothing. Her eyes rested on the computer screen, but she wasn't reading anything. Her mind kept replaying the same moment from the night before. "I will be announcing an engagement." Simple. Calm. Final. Irene exhaled slowly. Then she opened a blank document. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard for a few seconds. After 4 years, writing a resignation letter felt strangely heavy. But the words eventually came. Professional. Clear. Polite. Exactly the way Irene Cole handled everything in her life. She printed the letter, folded it neatly, placed it inside an envelope. Then she sat there for another minute before standing up. "All right," she murmured quietly, and walked toward Kang Junwoo's office. The door was slightly open. He was already inside. Of course he was. Junwoo rarely arrived late. Irene knocked lightly. "Come in." She stepped inside. He was standing by the window, reviewing something on his phone. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning, Miss Cole." "Good morning." She walked forward and placed the envelope on his desk. "I need to discuss something with you." Junwoo glanced at the envelope. "What is it?" "My resignation." Silence. He picked up the envelope slowly, opened it, and read. Irene stood calmly across the desk. Her posture was straight, professional, controlled, but her fingers were lightly clasped together. After a few seconds, Junwoo placed the paper down. Then he looked at her. "No." Irene blinked once. "Excuse me? You're not leaving, Irene?" His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it was absolute. She inhaled slowly. "With respect, Mr. Kang, this isn't a request. It is." "No. Yes." Irene frowned slightly. "I've given you 4 years of my work, and I expect many more. That's not how resignations work. That's exactly how this one works." Her frustration flickered for the first time. "You can't refuse a resignation." "I just did." "That's not legal. Neither is abandoning your CEO without proper transition." "I offered a transition period." "Denied." Irene stared at him. "You're being unreasonable." "I disagree. You don't even know why I'm leaving." "I know." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, you're reacting to last night." The room went quiet. Irene crossed her arms slightly. "You're very confident." "I'm very observant." This has nothing to do with your personal life. Junwoo studied her calmly. Then why now? Irene hesitated just for a second. That Dakin was enough. He noticed. You've worked here 4 years, he said. You've never once mentioned leaving. People change. Not overnight. Irene's patience began to crack. I'm allowed to move on. You're allowed to make logical decisions. This is logical. You're emotional. That did it. Irene straightened. I am not emotional. You are. Because I submitted a resignation, because you submitted it 12 hours after my engagement announcement. Her jaw tightened. That is irrelevant. It's very relevant. You think my life revolves around your romantic decisions. I think you're upset. I am not upset. Then why leave? Irene exhaled sharply. Because it's time. For what? For me to move on. From what? From this job. You like this job. That's not the point. You're good at this job. That's also not the point. Junwoo leaned back in his chair. So explain the point. Irene hesitated again, and that hesitation told him everything. For 4 years, she had been perfectly controlled. Today, she wasn't. Finally, she said quietly, You're getting married. Yes, and things will change. Not for you. You don't know that. I do. You can't guarantee that. I can. That's unrealistic. It's accurate. Irene shook her head. You're impossible. You're stubborn. That, too. Silence stretched between them. Then Junwoo reached for his tablet. What are you doing? Irene asked, reviewing the schedule. You're ignoring the conversation. I'm ending it. You can't just end ID. I just did. Her frustration finally surfaced fully. I'm resigning. You're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. Why? He looked up. Because I said so. Irene stared at him. Are you serious right now? Very. This is ridiculous. What's ridiculous is abandoning your responsibilities. I am not abandoning anything. You're walking away from 4 years of work. Yes, over a misunderstanding. This is not a misunderstanding. Then explain it. I don't have to explain my personal decisions. You do when they affect my company. This isn't your company problem. Everything that affects you is my company problem. Irene opened her mouth to argue again, then stopped because suddenly she realized something. Arguing with Kang Junwoo was completely useless. He had already decided. He would not accept the resignation, and he would not change his mind. She rubbed her forehead. You're exhausting. Thank you. That wasn't a compliment. I know. She sighed. So what now? Junwoo glanced back at the schedule. You're coming with me tonight. Her head snapped up. Excuse me? There's a gala. You can take someone else. I'm taking you. You're engaged. That's irrelevant. It's extremely relevant. You're my assistant. That's exactly why it's relevant. You're overthinking this. You're underthinking this. He closed the tablet calmly. Prepare for the gala. Irene stared at him. You still haven't accepted my resignation. I'm not going to. So this conversation meant nothing? It confirmed my decision, and that decision is you're not leaving. She threw her hands up slightly. This is unbelievable. Junwoo stood up. Irene, what? Go prepare for the gala. Her eyes narrowed. You're unbelievable, yet you've worked for me 4 years. She opened her mouth to argue again, then stopped because she suddenly realized something else. Arguing longer would only make him more stubborn, and Kang Junwoo was already one of the most stubborn men on earth. So instead, she said calmly, fine. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. Without turning back, she said, for the record, yes, I'm still resigning. A faint smile touched, we'll discuss that later. Irene walked out, and Kang Junwoo watched the door close slowly. For the first time in years, something about Irene Cole had finally become unpredictable, and strangely enough, he liked it. By the time Irene left the office that afternoon, she was still irritated. Not just irritated, furious. Kang Junwoo had refused her resignation like it was a meeting request he didn't feel like approving, and somehow, he had turned the entire conversation into a command. Prepare for the gala. She stepped into her apartment and dropped her bag on the couch. Unbelievable, she muttered. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. Mina. Irene answered on speaker while walking toward her closet. Hello. So, Mina asked instantly, did you resign? Yes, and he said no. There was a long pause, then Mina burst out laughing. I'm sorry. What? He refused. You're joking. I wish I were. How does someone refuse a resignation? By being Kang Jun-woo. Mina laughed harder. Oh my god, this is not funny. It's a little funny. He literally said, you're not leaving. Irene. Yes? That sounds suspiciously dramatic. It's not dramatic. It's annoying. Mina chuckled. So what now? Now apparently I have to attend a gala. Another pause. What? A gala. Why? Because he said so. You resigned and he invited you to a party? Yes. Your boss is insane. I know. Are you going? Irene opened her closet. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. I also have professional dignity. Professional dignity would involve ignoring him. That would involve creating chaos in the company. Fair point. Irene pulled out a long black evening dress. Simple, elegant. Professional enough for corporate events. That dress again? Mina asked over the phone. Yes, you wear that to every formal event. Because it works. You're boring. I'm practical. Wear heels this time. Irene snorted. No, why? I hate heels. They look good. They hurt. You're going to a gala with one of the most powerful men in Seoul. And? And you're wearing flat shoes? Boots. Boots? Yes. With an evening dress? Yes. Irene. What? That's criminal. I prefer comfort. You're impossible. Thank you. Mina laughed again. You're going to drive that man crazy. That's not my goal. Sure it isn't. At 7 that evening, a black car stopped outside Irene's apartment building. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Miss Cole. She nodded politely and stepped inside. During the drive across the city, Irene stared out the window quietly. Part of her was still annoyed. Another part was curious, because Kang Jun-woo rarely insisted on anything personally. Yet today he had refused her resignation like it was completely impossible. Why? She didn't understand it. The car finally arrived at the gala venue. A massive hotel ballroom filled with light and music. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet conversations. Powerful people, business leaders, political figures, the kind of event where alliances were made with handshakes and polite smiles. Irene stepped inside. Almost immediately, she spotted him. Kang Jun-woo stood near the center of the room, speaking with several executives. When he turned and saw her, his gaze paused briefly, and for the first time that evening, his expression changed. Because Irene looked stunning. The black dress was simple but elegant, fitting her perfectly. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She looked confident, graceful, effortlessly beautiful. Then his eyes moved downward and stopped. Boots? Black leather boots with an evening gown? His eyebrow lifted slightly. He excused himself from the executives and walked toward her. You're late. I'm 2 minutes early. That's late. I disagree. His gaze moved down again. Boots? Yes, with that dress? Yes, why? Irene shrugged calmly. I like walking comfortably. This is a formal gala, I'm aware. People wear heels. People make poor decisions. Junwoo stared at her for a second. Then, a quiet laugh escaped him. You're serious. Very. He shook his head slightly. You're unbelievable. You invited me. That may have been a mistake. Probably. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then Junwoo offered his arm. Come. She hesitated. Why? Because people are watching. They're always watching. That's exactly the problem. Irene sighed quietly and took his arm. The moment they stepped further into the ballroom, several people turned toward them. Whispers spread through the room because Kang Jun-woo had arrived with someone. Not a model, not an actress, not a famous heiress, just his assistant. Irene ignored the looks. She had attended enough corporate events to know how to behave. Calm, professional, unbothered. But Junwoo noticed the attention immediately. And strangely, he didn't mind it. Half an hour later, Irene stepped away briefly to grab a glass of water. As she stood near one of the tall tables, a man approached her. Tall, well-dressed, friendly smile. I don't believe we've met. Irene looked you up politely. Irene Cole. Daniel Park. He shook her hand. You work with Kang Jun-woo. I do. I've seen you at a few meetings. That's possible. Daniel smiled. You're very good at your job. Thank you. Though I imagine it's difficult. Why? Working for someone like him. Irene tilted her head slightly. What does that mean? He's intense. That's one way to describe him, Daniel chuckled. You're loyal. I'm employed. That too. He gestured toward the dance floor. Would you like to dance? Irene blinked. Oh. Before she could answer, I don't think that's necessary. The voice came from behind them. Daniel turned. Kang Junwoo stood there, calm, composed, but something in his eyes had sharpened. Daniel smiled politely. I was only asking, and she was about to decline. Irene glanced sideways. I hadn't answered yet. Junwoo looked at her. You were going to decline. You're very confident tonight. I'm very observant. Daniel raised his hand slightly. Well, I don't want to create troubles. He smiled at Irene. Maybe another time. Then he walked away. Irene turned slowly toward Junwoo. That was unnecessary, was it? Yes. I disagree. You interrupted a perfectly polite conversation. You were being invited to dance. Yes. And? I might have said yes. Junwoo's expression darkened slightly. No. Irene folded her arms. No, you don't get to decide that. I just did. She stared at him. You're jealous. I'm practical. That looked like jealousy. That was efficiency. Efficiency? Yes. You removed competition. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, competition. Junwoo realized what he had just implied. Then he simply said calmly, let's get back to the table. But Irene didn't move. Instead, she studied him carefully. Because for the first time in 4 years, Kang Junwoo looked slightly irritated. And that was new. Very new. Across the room, another pair of eyes had been watching everything. Seo, youre, his fiancée. And her expression had turned cold. Irene noticed the woman the moment the room shifted. Some people carried attention with them. Seo youre carried something stronger. Power. She entered the ballroom, surrounded by quiet whispers and subtle curiosity. Elegant, poised, and dressed in a shimmering silver gown that clearly cost more than Irene's entire wardrobe. She was beautiful, in the polished, untouchable way women from powerful families often were. And she was looking directly at Kang Junwoo. Then her gaze slid slowly to Irene. That was when Irene understood. So this was the fiancé. Well, Irene murmured quietly under her breath. Junwoo followed her line of sight. His expression didn't change. Seo youre walked toward them with calm, graceful steps. The kind of walk that told the entire room she was used to being watched. When she reached them, she smiled. But it wasn't warm. Junwoo. Her voice was soft and controlled. Junwoo nodded once. Youre. She looked at Irene next. Her eyes moved from Irene's face to the black dress, then down to the boots. The faintest flicker of judgment crossed her expression. How interesting, she said lightly. Irene held her gaze calmly. Seo youre tilted her head slightly. You must be the assistant, Irene Cole? She extended her hand politely. Youre looked at it for a moment before shaking it. Her grip was cool, measured. Seo youre. Yes, Irene said calmly. I recognized you. Of course you did. A small silence stretched between them. Then youre glanced toward Junwoo. You brought your assistant tonight. Yes. I assumed you would bring me. Junwoo didn't react. This is a corporate event. And I am your fiancé. Her tone remained smooth, but the tension underneath it was clear. I'm aware, he replied. Youre turned her attention back to Irene. You seem very comfortable here. Irene didn't flinch. I've attended many events like this. With him? Yes. For work, Youre said. For work, Irene repeated calmly. Another pause. Then Youre smiled again. But tonight is different, isn't it? Irene raised an eyebrow slightly. How so? Youre's gaze sharpened. Because people might misunderstand. Misunderstand what? That a man might bring his assistant instead of his fiancé. Irene held her gaze. And what exactly would they misunderstand? Youre's smile thinned. Junwoo spoke before she could answer. That's enough. Both women looked at him. Youre blinked slightly. Excuse me? You're creating a scene. I'm asking a question. You're implying something. And if I am? Junwoo's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. Then stop. The quiet firmness of his tone made several nearby conversations fall silent. Youre looked at him carefully. You're defending her. I'm ending this conversation. She's just your assistant. Yes. Yet you seem very protective. I don't tolerate disrespect. Yure's eyes narrowed slightly. Disrespect? You heard me. For a moment, the tension between them was sharp enough to cut through the entire ballroom. Irene cleared her throat softly. Mr. Kang. Both of them looked at her. I think I should step away. No, Junwoo said immediately. She raised an eyebrow. I'm capable of walking across a room without supervision. That's not what I meant. Youre folded her arms. This is fascinating. Neither of them responded. Youre studied Irene again. You've worked for him how long? 4 years. That's impressive. Thank you. Most assistants don't last that long. I'm good at my job. Youre's gaze moved slowly over her again. Yes, I'm beginning to see that. Irene smiled politely. Good evening, Miss CO. And with that, she stepped away. The moment she left, Youre turned sharply toward Junwoo. You embarrassed me. I stopped you. You sided with her. I corrected you. She's your employee. Yes. And I'm your fiancé. For now. The words landed quietly between them. Youre stared at him. What did you just say? Junwoo didn't look away. You heard me. You're reconsidering our engagement. I'm reconsidering many things. Youre laughed softly. In the middle of a gala? In the middle of unnecessary drama. You think I'm the drama? You created it. She's the one standing beside you. She works for me. You brought her here. Yes. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself. Youre's expression hardened. You've changed. No, yes. You never used to defend people like this. I defend competence. She's an assistant. She's exceptional. Youre went very still. Oh, something in her eyes shifted. Understanding. So that's what this is. Junwoo said nothing. Youre let out a slow breath. I see. Across the room, Irene stood near the balcony doors, watching the city lights dot outside. She had no intention of listening to their argument. This was none of her business. But a few minutes later, she felt someone step beside her. You handled that well. She didn't turn. I've dealt with worse. Junwoo leaned lightly against the railing. You weren't intimidated. She's a person, not a dragon. She's powerful. So are you. And yet you're not afraid of me. Irene glanced sideways. Should I be? Many people are. I work for you. That doesn't explain it. She shrugged lightly. I prefer competence over fear. Junwoo studied her for a moment. Miss Cole. Yes. You're still resigning. Yes. Even after tonight? Especially after tonight. He watched the lights of the city quietly. You're very stubborn. You refused my resignation. That's different. How? I'm your boss. Irene smirked slightly. That's your argument? It's a good one. Not really. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Junwoo said quietly, You're not leaving. Irene looked directly at him. I already told you. I know. And? I don't accept it. She shook her head. You're unbelievable. Yet you're still here. For now. Junwoo looked at her for a long moment, and something about that moment felt different. More personal. More dangerous. Because for the first time in 4 years, Kang Junwoo was no longer looking at Irene Cole like an assistant, and Irene could feel it. Which was exactly why she needed to leave before things became even more complicated. The rest of the gala passed in a strange blur for Irene. She did what she had always done for 4 years. Stayed professional, smiled politely when necessary, avoided unnecessary conversations. But the energy around Kang Junwoo had shifted. People noticed things. Powerful people always did. They noticed the argument between him and Seo Youre. They noticed Irene standing beside him most of the evening. And they noticed the way Junwoo's attention kept drifting back to her. It was subtle, but not invisible. At one point, Irene leaned toward him, slightly. You should probably speak to the investors near the stage. Junwoo glanced at them. They can wait. They look impatient. They're always impatient. That's not a reason to ignore them. He studied her. You're still managing my schedule at a gala. That habit doesn't disappear overnight. You're not leaving. Irene exhaled slowly. We've already had this conversation. Yes. And? And I still haven't changed my mind. She gave him a long look. You're impossible, and yet very successful. That's not the same thing. No, but it helps. Before she could respond, a man approached them. Older, gray suit, sharp eyes. Junwoo. Junwoo nodded. Chairman Lee. The older man smiled slightly. I hear congratulations are in order. For what? Your engagement. Junwoo didn't answer immediately. Chairman Lee chuckled softly. Young people. Then he glanced toward Irene. And who is this? My assistant Irene inclined her head politely. Irene Cole. Chairman Lee studied her carefully. She's the one who runs your schedule. Junwoo nodded. She's the reason my schedule works. The older man smiled knowingly. I see. His eyes moved between them for a moment. Then he laughed quietly. Well, enjoy the evening, and he walked away. Irene frowned slightly. What was that? Chairman Lee. That doesn't explain the look. He enjoys observing people. And what exactly did he observe? Junwoo didn't answer. Instead, he said calmly, "You should get some air." "I'm fine." "You look annoyed." "I'm not annoyed." "You're irritated." "That's different. You're irritated because of youre. I'm irritated because tonight is exhausting." "That too." Irene crossed her arms. "Can we not analyze my emotions?" "You started the analysis." "I started my resignation, and I refused it." She sighed. "This conversation is going in circles. Because you keep trying to leave. Because I want to leave." Junwoo leaned slightly closer. "You don't." Irene stared at him. "You're very confident about my feelings. I've worked with you for 4 years. That doesn't mean you understand me. It means I observe patterns. And what pattern are you seeing? That you're running." She laughed softly. "That's dramatic. That's accurate. I'm being practical. You're avoiding something, and you're assuming things." Junwoo opened his mouth to reply. "Junwoo." Seo Yure's voice cut through the moment. Both of them turned. She was standing a few feet away now. Her posture was perfectly composed, but the tension in her eyes hadn't disappeared. "May we talk?" she asked. Junwoo nodded once. "Of course." Youre glanced briefly at Irene. "Alone." Irene stepped back immediately. "Of course." Junwoo looked at her. "Irene." "Yes?" "Don't leave." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not running away." "Good." Then he followed youre toward the other side of the ballroom. Irene watched them go, and for the first time that evening, she allowed herself to breathe. Because something about tonight felt unstable, like the ground under everything was shifting. Across the room, Seo Youre stopped near a quiet corner. "Are you serious?" she asked calmly. Junwoo looked at her. "Yes." "You embarrassed me." "You embarrassed yourself." "She's your assistant." "Yes, and you're defending her in public." "I'm correcting you in public." Youre folded her arms. "You've never acted like this before." "That doesn't mean I won't." "This engagement was agreed upon months ago." "Yes, our families approved it." "I know. It strengthens both companies. I'm aware." "Then what exactly is the problem?" Junwoo's answer came quietly. "There isn't one." "Really?" "Yes." Youre studied him carefully. "Then why do I feel like something changed tonight?" He didn't respond. Youre sighed. "You know what people are already saying?" "I don't care. You should." "Why?" "Because appearances matter. Appearances are temporary. Our families won't see it that way. They'll survive." "You're being reckless." "No." "You're thinking emotionally." "No." Yure's eyes sharpened. "Is this about her?" Junwoo met her gaze. "This is about us." "And what about us?" "We're not in love. That was never the point." "I know. Then what is the problem?" Junwoo looked back toward the ballroom, toward the place where Irene had been standing. Except now she wasn't there. His gaze sharpened. "Excuse me," he said suddenly. Youre blinked. "Where are you going?" Junwoo was already walking away. Meanwhile, Irene had stepped onto the balcony for some air. The night air was cool. The city lights stretched endlessly below. She leaned against the railing. "You survived," a familiar voice said behind her. Irene turned. "Daniel Park." He smiled. "I thought your boss scared me away earlier." "He did, and yet here I am again. Very brave, or very curious." "About what?" "About the woman who can argue with Kang Junwoo." Irene laughed softly. "That wasn't an argument. That looked like one. It was a discussion. Most people don't discuss things with him. Most people aren't responsible for his schedule." Daniel leaned beside her at the railing. "So you've worked for him for years?" "Yes." "That's impressive." "I hear that a lot. And now you're leaving." Her head turned slightly. "How do you know that?" He smiled. "Word travels." Irene sighed quietly. "Of course it does. Can I ask why?" "Personal reasons." "That usually means complicated reasons." "That's also accurate." Daniel studied her for a moment. "You know," he said gently, "if you do leave, there are other companies that would hire you instantly. I'm aware. Some of them might treat you better." Irene tilted her head slightly. "Better how?" "Less complicated bosses." She laughed softly. "That might be nice." At that moment, the balcony door opened behind them, and Kang Junwoo stepped outside. His eyes moved from Daniel to Irene, and something in his expression darkened slightly because, for the second time that evening, another man was standing too close to her and he didn't like it. The balcony door opened behind Irene. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Kang Junwoo's presence had a way of filling a space before he even spoke. Daniel noticed it too. He straightened slightly. "Ah," Daniel said with a polite smile, "your boss has arrived." Junwoo stepped closer, his gaze moving from Daniel to Irene. "What are you doing out here?" he asked her. "Getting air." His eyes shifted back to Daniel. "And you?" Daniel chuckled lightly. "Talking, I can see that." The air between them tightened. Irene sighed quietly. "Mr. Kang, you were invited to dance earlier," Junwoo said calmly to Daniel. Daniel shrugged. "She declined." "I didn't decline," Irene corrected. Daniel smiled. "Not yet." Junwoo's expression hardened slightly. "She's not dancing tonight." Irene turned toward him. "You don't get to decide that." Junwoo looked at her. "I disagree." "Of course you do." Daniel raised his hands lightly. "All right. I think I'm suddenly interrupting something." "You are, sir," Junwoo said. Daniel laughed under his breath. "Well, that's my cue." He looked at Irene. "If you ever do leave this company, Miss Cole, give me a call." Then he walked back inside. The balcony fell quiet. Irene folded her arms. "That was unnecessary. He was recruiting you. He was being polite. He was being opportunistic." She raised an eyebrow. "And that bothers you?" "Yes." "Why?" Junwoo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer to the railing beside her. "You're still leaving?" "Yes." "You haven't reconsidered?" "No." "Even after tonight?" "Especially after tonight." He studied her carefully. "You think I don't see what's happening? I think you're imagining things. You're running. And you're controlling. I'm protecting something valuable. I'm not a company asset. You're more than that." The words landed quietly between them. Irene looked at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the balcony door opened again. CEO Youre stepped outside. Her gaze moved between them slowly. "So," she said softly, "this is where you disappeared to." Junwoo straightened. "Youre." Her eyes shifted to Irene. "Interesting." Irene sighed. "Miss CEO, you don't need to explain anything," Youre said smoothly. Her eyes returned to Junwoo. "I think I understand now." Junwoo said nothing. Youre laughed quietly. "You should have told me." "Told you what?" "That your assistant was more important than this engagement." Irene's eyes widened slightly. It's fine," Youre said, cutting her off. Her expression was calm now. Too calm. "This was always a business arrangement." Junwoo nodded. "Yes. And now?" "Now it's unnecessary." Youre studied him for a moment, then she sighed. "You know what's amusing?" "What?" "I thought the biggest threat to this engagement would be another powerful family." Her eyes flicked toward Irene. "Not an assistant with boots." Irene blinked. "Fair enough." Youre almost smiled. Almost. Then she looked back at Junwoo. "Call my father tomorrow." "I will." "And Junwoo?" "Yes. You should learn something tonight." "What's that?" "You can't control everything." Her gaze shifted briefly toward Irene. "Especially people." Then she turned and walked back inside, leaving the balcony quiet again. Irene exhaled slowly. "Well." Wu looked at her. "Well?" That escalated quickly. "Yes. You just ended your engagement." "Yes. And you're still refusing my resignation." "Yes." She shook her head in disbelief. "You're unbelievable." Junwoo's voice softened slightly. "No." He looked directly at her. "I'm finally being honest." The gala ended quietly after that. Not dramatically, not with shouting or spectacle, just whispers. Powerful people were very good at pretending nothing had happened, even when everyone in the room knew something had changed. Irene stayed long enough to make sure the investors had spoken with Junwoo and the final introductions were finished. Old habits, professional habits. When the last conversation ended, she picked up her coat. "I'll call the car," she said. Junwoo looked at her. "You're leaving?" "Yes. You're not staying for the after-party." "I'm not really in the mood for champagne and gossip." "That's fair." She moved toward the exit. He followed. Outside, the night air was colder than before. The city lights reflected against the glass buildings across the street. The car arrived quickly. The driver stepped out to open the door. Irene turned to Junwoo. "Good night, Mr. Kang." He didn't move. "Irene." "Yes. You're still leaving." "Yes. You haven't reconsidered." "No." He studied her for a moment. Then he said quietly, "You always do this." "Do what?" "You run before something becomes important." She frowned. "That's not fair." "It's accurate. I stayed 4 years." Yes, and that's exactly why you're leaving. She crossed her arms. I'm leaving. D because it's time. No. I've learned everything I need to learn. No. I've paid most of my loans. No. Then why do you think I'm leaving? Junwoo looked directly at her. Because tonight became personal. Irene looked away. You're imagining things. I don't imagine patterns. Silence stretched between them. Then he said quietly, for 4 years you were the only person who never asked anything from me. That's because I was hired to work. You never tried to stay. That's because I had my own life. You never tried to belong in my world. I don't belong in your world. Junwoo stepped closer. That's where you're wrong. She shook her head. No, yes, your world is powerful families, alliances, political marriages. That engagement just ended. That doesn't change the world you live in. And what world do you think you live in? A normal one. You think you're ordinary? I know I am, Junwoo laughed softly. You walked into my office 4 years ago and argued about my schedule on your first day. That's called doing my job. You've argued with executives twice your rank. They were wrong. You returned gifts from actresses. They were distracting. You told me I was 3 minutes late for my own meeting. You were. Junwoo shook his head. You're not ordinary, Irene. She looked at him carefully. Then what am I? You're the only person who's ever treated me like a man instead of a title. The words settled quietly between them. For once, Irene didn't have an immediate response. Junwoo continued. For 4 years, I never had to wonder if you were staying because of my name, my money, or my position. She looked down slightly. I stayed because I needed a job. You stayed because you respected the work. That too. And tonight, he paused. You're the only person who tried to leave. Irene exhaled slowly. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything. She looked back at him. Why? Because you were the only one who never tried to stay. He stepped a little closer. And somehow, you're the only person I don't want to leave. The words hung in the quiet air between them. Irene's heart beat faster, which annoyed her slightly. You're very persuasive tonight. I'm being honest. You're my boss. I'm a man asking a question. Her eyebrows lifted. A question? Yes, what question? Junwoo held her gaze. Stay. The single word carried more weight than any order he had ever given. Irene stared at him. So what now? She asked quietly. You refuse my resignation again? Junwoo shook his head. No. Then what? I'm asking. The driver cleared his throat politely beside the car. Neither of them moved. Finally, Irene sighed softly. You're very difficult to say no to. I've been told that. You're also very stubborn. Yes. She studied his face for a moment longer. Then she shook her head and laughed quietly. Fine. Junwoo blinked once. Fine, I'll stay. A slow smile appeared on his face. But, Irene added quickly, there are conditions. His eyebrow lifted. Conditions? Yes. I'm listening. No controlling my life. Fair. No refusing future resignations. We'll negotiate that later. And you stop interrupting my conversations. With Daniel? With anyone. Junwoo considered it. I'll try. That's not convincing. It's honest. Irene laughed again. Then she stepped into the car. Junwoo closed the door behind her. As the car pulled away, Irene looked out the window and shook her head. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Yet somehow she was smiling. Sometimes the people who mean the most to us are the ones we never expected to stay. And sometimes the hardest thing for someone powerful to say is not, I command you, but please stay. So, tell me, if you were Irene, would you have stayed or walked away? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a good romance. Hi everyone, it's Diana aka AKORA Stories. I hope you enjoyed this story. Personally, what stayed with me the most was how sometimes the people we try the hardest to walk away from are the ones who refuse to let us go. But I'm curious, if you were Irene, would you have stayed with Junwoo or would you have slept? Let me know in the comments and I will see you in the next story. Thank you.